So I wanted to read a great paragraph, long, or part of a long paragraph in the typical style of prose. Unfortunately, at least in the translation of Maurice Merleau-Ponty. This is not a very good translation or edition, but it's the one I've got, and it's his major work, Phenomenology of Perception, and his name is Maurice Merleau-Ponty, and very significant uh, inspiration for me. He's no longer living. Anyway, this is on his final chapter, page 527 of this edition. He asks, "What then is freedom? To be born is both to be born of the world and to be born into the world. The world is already constituted, but also never completely constituted. In the first case, the world as already constituted, the constituted world. In the first case, we are acted upon. In the second, in the world being constituted, in the process of, you know, being constituted still. In the second, we are open to an infinite number of possibilities. But this analysis is still abstract, for we exist in both ways at once. There is, therefore, never determinism and never absolute choice. I am never a thing and never a bare consciousness. In fact, even our own pieces of initiative, even the situations which we have chosen, bear us on once they have been entered upon by virtue of a state rather than an act. The generality of the role and of the situation comes to the aid of decision. So there's a kind of generality in your role that you have to abide by, and this situation you find yourself in, uh, which determinists would say that the situation is really is you're sort of this big ball of reflexes, right? That's what you are essentially, and that everything is this is you are what you feel, what you experience as agency, as self-determination, is in fact just you're sort of this pinball being bounced around in a situation. Although the pinball, you in this case, feels like it is doing the rolling, it's actually being rolled and determined from the outside, just like a thing. Um, so there are two sides to this dialectic that Merleau-Ponty is going to work. There's what we've just described, the pinball view kind of thing, where you are just a thing among other things, and that's what an organism or a human being even essentially is. And then there's going to be this absolute bare consciousness, this absolute freedom of choice, which is independent of a situation on the other side. And he's going to say, he's playing off both sides in order to expound his position, which is neither or both. And then, yeah, since if it was both, it would be neither, because it would be something else. But he says, in fact, even our own pieces of initiative, even the situations which we have chosen, bear us on, once they have been entered upon by virtue of a state rather than an act. So you begin it with the act, the choice, and then you are sort of carried on by the pulse of your decision, and then it becomes a state, a way of being, a state that you sort of coast along as. Anyway, he says the generality of the role and of the situation comes to the aid of decision. And in this exchange between the situation and the person who takes it up, it is impossible to determine precisely the share contributed by the situation and the share contributed by freedom. Let us suppose that a man is tortured to make him talk. If he refuses to give the name and addresses which it is desired to extract from him, this does not arise from a solitary and unsupported decision. The man still feels himself to be with his comrades, and, being still involved in the common struggle, he is, as it were, incapable of talking. So that's not just this bare decision that he makes at the present moment. Like I think he's alluding to something that Sartre would say, that the decision isn't just made right there, the act right there, but in fact he's still involved in this world and in this world horizon and this world situation that is his life and his existence. You know, that's bearing his freedom along. In the case of the man who's being tortured and refuses to give the information. So he says, the man still, so I'll read that again. Let us suppose that a man is tortured to make him talk. If he refuses to give the names and addresses which it is desired to extract from him, this does not arise from a solitary and unsupported decision. The man still feels himself to be with his comrades, and being still involved in the common struggle, he is, as it were, incapable of talking. Or else, for months or years, he has, in his mind, faced this test and staked his whole life upon it. So again, it's the freedom goes back to the individual, uh, which is a situated kind of individuality, though. Or finally, he wants to prove by coming through it what he has always thought and said about freedom. These motives do not cancel, so he has different kinds of motives that could be in play here. These motives do not cancel out freedom, but at least ensure that it does not go unbuttressed in being. What withstands pain is not, in short, a bare consciousness, but the prisoner with his comrades or with those he loves and under whose gaze he lives. Or else the awareness of his proudly willed solitude, which again is a crude mode of the being of Mitsein, or being with. That might go beyond over some people's heads if they haven't read Merleau-Ponty, but just stick with me. And probably the individual in his prison daily reawakens these phantoms, which give, he's imagining, the other people and the different motives, himself with other people in past situations and future hypothetical situations. All of these are the phantoms he's talking about in the case of the prisoner. And probably the individual in his prison daily reawakens these phantoms, which give back to him the strength he gave to them. But conversely, insofar as he has committed himself to this action, formed a bond with his comrades, or adopted this morality, it is because the historical situation, the comrades, the world around, the world around him seem to him to expect that conduct from him. The analysis could be pursued endlessly in this way. We choose our world, and the world chooses us. What is certain in any case is that we can at no time set aside within ourselves a redoubt to which being does not find its way through, without seeing this freedom immediately and by the very fact of being a living experience, figure as being and become a motive and a buttress. Taken concretely, freedom is always a meeting of the inner and the outer, even the pre-human and prehistoric freedom which we began in the discussion. Concrete freedom, and it shrinks without ever disappearing altogether in direct proportion to the lessening of the tolerance allowed by the bodily and institutional data of our lives. And I'll go to the next part. He says, our commitments sustain our power, and there is no freedom without some power. Our freedom, it is said, is either total or non-existent. This dilemma between freedom being either total freedom or no freedom at all, this dilemma belongs to objective thought and its stable companion, analytical reflection. if indeed we place ourselves within being, or never mind, it must, well, if indeed we place ourselves within being, it must necessarily be the case that our actions must have their origin outside us. And if we revert to constituting consciousness, a bare consciousness, they must originate within us. But we have learned precisely to recognize the order of phenomena. We are involved in the world and with others in an inextricable tangle. The idea of situation rules out absolute freedom at the source of our commitments, and equally, indeed, at their terminus. Hmm. So this is what Merleau-Ponty is basically saying, is that you can kind of think about, you can shift perspectives in thinking about whether freedom comes purely from the subject or whether it's totally determined from outside the subject, or whether the subject is determined by the objects around it as as another object among objects. And you'll go back and forth here thinking about it, and that's the point. That's the point for him, is that we choose the world and the world chooses us, and it happens at once. Um, it, there's this kind of ambiguity in play, which allows for freedom, but not an absolute freedom. Um, and that's what's existential about about Merleau-Ponty's philosophy, and it's existential in that sense because he's trying to describe existence and what it means to be a human being in the first person in living, uh, and not reflecting upon things as in an objective attitude, which is sort of derivative from this original mode of being in the world, but actually describing and trying to get at our being in the world. And so I think if you want to, if you didn't follow that, I'll put a link to that page, and you can read it on Google Books. But um, Merleau-Ponty has some more points, has more to say than that, obviously. But I thought that was a great paragraph, a great example of a sort of an alternative view that's at the same time a kind of mediation between the dilemmas that we get ourselves into conceptually, and 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 these conceptual dilemmas between are we purely determined or not determined. They have real effects on our lives, um, and the lives of other people, as I think that there have been some studies that have shown that if you give people some kind of spiel or talk presentation on how there is no such thing as free will and that everything is determined, and then you give those people a test, they're more likely to cheat. Um, I'd have to find the sources for that, but I know that Jan Slaby, that's Janslaby. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he started what's called critical neuroscience, and that's a little example that he gives, a study he often likes to cite when he's talking about uh, the way that neuroscience and popular concepts, which we think are just purely um, of purely objective worth, in fact play into the decisions that we make and the way that we see ourselves, and therefore the way that we act, um, because we carry those ideas with us into our action, and we can then there and vice versa. Um, yeah, so I think I'll just leave it off there. I've gone, I think, probably too long, but I'll try to give a little bit more of a clear exposition of some of Merleau-Ponty's views in further videos. Thanks.